Over the last couple of days, it has been the Conservative Party conference, at least when I'm recording this video. And, I do even know some people who are unfortunate enough to be there. But it's been an interesting affair. I think it's fair to say, things like the Secretary for Work and Pensions, Theresa Coffey, singing "I've Had the Time of My Life" on a karaoke, literally the day that she takes £20 a week off the poorest, most vulnerable people in our society, many of whom are disabled. It really has been a bit of a shit show, but there's definitely some useful lessons in there. And one of them can be taken from Boris Johnson's speech. So obviously, as leader of the Tories, that's a big deal at the conference. And unfortunately, his speech was pretty light on content. There was not very much policy. People criticise Keir Starmer a lot for not committing to many policies, but Boris Johnson is literally the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and he doesn't really seem to have all that many policies that he's proposing. And some of them are things the Tories have scrapped and are now reintroducing in a less comprehensive or less well-funded form as well. But what I really want to focus on is what Mr. Johnson said about immigration and worker productivity in the economy, because I think it's very interesting, and it speaks to a really fascinating sort of viewpoint that is devoid of all logic and evidence and rationality that a lot of people in British politics and just generally the British public hold. What Johnson is essentially doing here is he's collating these two things, and he's saying that basically as a result of immigration, mass immigration, whatever that really means, what quantifies as actual mass immigration and what's normal immigration? Are there other levels, medium immigration, or I don't know, but he's saying that is the primary reason for real issues in worker productivity. The productive sort of capacity of the UK economy has been stalling, it's been stagnating for a good while, and the reason is we've had loads of immigration. Now, Lewis Goodall did a fantastic segment on Newsnight on the BBC about that, where he basically pointed out that that's not true at all. Right, the figures just do not bear that reading of the causes of this productivity issue out at all. It's just not the case. Obviously, we had very prominent increases in productivity from 2000 to 2008. During those years of the new Labour government, obviously until the global financial crisis hit in 2008, and productivity was improving a lot then. Wages were growing, living standards were improving, and we had loads of immigration. And then, after the financial crisis, obviously things got really, really bad for a short while, and then productivity started to improve again over the coming years, albeit wages stagnated, primarily because of austerity. And then Brexit happened and it just sort of levelled off. And when the Brexit vote happened, it just sort of levelled off. And then Brexit itself occurred in 2020, and then fell off a cliff. So worker productivity is a huge issue now, and it does not seem to correlate with immigration at all. It really doesn't. He points out in the segment, which is a brilliant segment, you should all go and watch it, but don't want too many clips from other sources in one video. But basically what he points out is that in the US, in Germany and in France, these very, very high immigration countries where a lot of people go there, their productivity is better than the UK's. And a lot of countries that have very limited immigration, like Japan. Japan is a large country, it's an island, it's a developed economy. There's a lot of parallels with the UK. It has far worse productivity, and it has very little immigration. So there is clearly I mean, there's no correlation, let alone causation at play here. And so I think it's important to realise, and obviously there's loads of other, important perspectives on this issue from different experts, and these people are saying, by and large, very similar things, that, it's very unlikely that significantly reducing immigration is going to improve productivity by itself. Not to mention how we have skyrocketing energy prices, gas prices, all these things. It's virtually impossible for most people who have quite low income jobs, certainly most young people, to get into the housing market. There are a myriad of other issues. So those things are not going to just be magically solved. They're not going to disappear because we say, right, well, we're no longer getting, hundreds of thousands of immigrants every year, and, a few tens of thousands coming into the country. And of course, the whole argument about ending freedom of movement of people and labour and everything in the EU, the fact that we are now no longer in the EU, so we're not going to have that, so that's going to improve productivity. Obviously, it doesn't bear out because, as I mentioned, Germany and France, more productive countries than we are. It's also worth noting that whilst productivity improvements generally do result in wage improvements, productivity has way outstripped wage improvements since the 1960s, but especially the 1980s. Since the 80s, productivity in the workplace has skyrocketed. Workers in the UK and pretty much every developed country and pretty much every developing country are far more productive now than they were in the 1980s, and yet wages have not kept pace with that at all. If the minimum wage had kept pace with worker productivity, I know the minimum wage wasn't actually implemented in the UK back in the 60s. I know we only got it, I think it was 1999 when that happened, thanks to New Labour. But if it had kept pace with productivity improvements since the back end of the 1960s, the minimum wage in the UK would probably be somewhere around £17-18. Now, that's not wishful thinking, that's not me being a silly leftist who doesn't know what he's talking about. That is just generally representative of the amount of wealth being generated by workers. That is just what that is. And what's very important is that the government doesn't have a plan to improve productivity. They just reckon that it will happen because immigration is going down. But there's essentially no evidence that that'll actually happen. Therefore, it looks like, while the government will be increasing wages in some ways, gradually, they're going to increase the minimum wage to like £9.40 or whatever it is, that will actually have a negative impact on the economy potentially, because productivity won't be improving. Right now, it's very important to say I am all for improving the wages of people. Let's be real. 95% of workers in the British economy and most economies around the world are not getting paid wages that are reflective of the amount of wealth they create. They're getting paid far too little, especially people like teachers, teaching assistants, nurses, care workers, scientists, people who work in sanitation, people who work in shops. These jobs are actually extraordinarily vital to the economy and they generate tremendous amounts of wealth, but they're not valued particularly well, certainly not in terms of pay. But if you're not improving productivity, you don't have a plan for that, and productivity may indeed fall as a result of you dramatically reducing immigration, you have a real problem on your hands, because now employers are going to be forced to pay higher wages to people. The productivity isn't going to improve. So either employers are just going to be like, all right, I'm the boss, I'll take a pay cut, which the vast majority of people will not do, or it'll hit the consumer. So that's why, I think Labour really needs to be pushing this idea that we need to be improving productivity, we need to be investing in infrastructure and skills and education and all of these things, public transport, etc., whilst also raising wages and improving working conditions and things like that. Those two things work really, really well in step with each other. They interlink really well, and the economy improves as a result. Living standards rise. But the government's plan may actually cause the total opposite of that. They're making a really big gamble here, and I'm really not sure it's going to pay off. Obviously, I hope it does, because at the end of the day, I disagree with the Tories. I don't like the Tories, but you know, if they succeed in improving the living standards of the British people, I'm gonna be happy about that, you know. But yeah, I want to know what your thoughts are on this, and generally Boris Johnson's speech as well, all that other stuff that he sort of rambled on about. You know, do you have hope that productivity and living standards are going to improve under the Tories over the next few years? I certainly don't, because they have certainly not fared well since they took office in 2010. And it's clear to me that really, you know, despite all their flaws, the Labour Party is the one that has a really strong track record of improving productivity, improving wages, improving living standards, improving the quality of public services, and a lot more. So that's my view, but I'd love to hear yours, so leave them in the comments if you so wish. Thank you all very much for watching, as always, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.